here from Choose to Live with Joy. Let's talk about joy. In case you haven't guessed already, today we're going to talk about how humor can help you find your joy. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Maybe I meant to say, which comes first, joy or humor? Most people think you have to have joy in your life before you can have humor. But actually the opposite is true. Humor cultivates joy. If you're having trouble finding your joy, it may mean that you are just taking life way too seriously. You might need to start to inject humor into your life. Bringing humor into troubled situations can create moments of joy. Humor actually brings perspective to most situations. Humor serves a number of different ways of helping you find your joy. It can diffuse stress and anxiety. It can relieve tense situations and create levity whenever life becomes serious. And it can improve your mental health. Now, you might realize now that humor is very important in my life. Some of you may not know, but my husband Ted and I are clowns. He's peanut butter and I'm jelly. We don't do birthday parties, but we do clowning for charitable organizations. So as you can see, turning to humor is sort of second nature for me. But humor doesn't come easily for everyone. How in heaven's name can you put humor into your life if you don't think that you're very funny? Well, one of the best ways to add humor to a situation is to learn how to laugh at yourself. This is a great tactic if you're trying to diffuse stress and anxiety. I remember one time I was having to do a presentation for a group, and it involved a lot of numbers and statistics, and that is not my forte. I was very nervous about it. I had created a really nice binder and had a beautiful cover, and if anybody in the group had a question, all they would have to do is turn to the correct page and their questions would be answered. So I was feeling pretty confident. Before the meeting began, I took those binders and put one on the table in front of each person's seat. But I could tell as I began the presentation that my voice was quivering. I was anything but calm. About 2 minutes into the presentation, I asked everyone to turn to page 3 in their binders. As they did this, I heard a lot of shuffling of papers and people trying to figure out what was going on, and suddenly I was horrified to realize that the papers had been inserted upside down in the binders. Well, call on my humor at this point. I just said to everyone, okay, at this point, you need to stand on your heads in order to read the report. I wanted to make sure that you stayed awake during the entire presentation. Well, this caused laughter from everybody, and suddenly that serious atmosphere was much lighter. Now, I could have become very defensive or tried to blame someone else for what had happened with the binders. But instead, I turned to humor, and suddenly my nervousness was gone. Laughing at yourself breaks that bond of perfection that we're all working on and relaxes you and relaxes the others that are around you. I was able to feel joy in my accomplishment at the end of that presentation. Another role that humor plays is to cut a tension-filled atmosphere. You know, whenever people are at odds with each other, there are very few smiles going on. It's pretty serious. But humor can break the barrier between people. When humor is infused into a situation, you can almost immediately see a change in people's body language. They've been sitting in a chair all tense with their shoulders tight and their fists clenched, and then they start laughing. They lean back in that chair. Their shoulders start moving with the laughter. Humor says, come with me. We can laugh at this situation together. A great example of this is a story I heard a few years ago about a couple of friends who had drifted apart over a silly disagreement. After several years had passed, they were unexpectedly thrown together, and guess what? That argument started anew just like they had never been apart. But the one man decided to infuse humor into the situation, and he said, "Come on, let's thumb wrestle over this. The best out of 3 wins the argument." So, of course, they started laughing and realized that the argument really wasn't that important. They were able to put joy back into their relationship. Now, one of the most interesting roles that humor can play is to bring levity to very serious situations. Humor becomes a saving grace during times of grief or loss. The first time I became aware of this was whenever I was in my 20s and a beloved aunt of mine had passed away. I was sitting in the funeral home with my cousins, who were all about the same age as I, and we weren't very experienced at dealing with the loss of a loved one. But as we sat there, we started telling some funny stories about situations with our aunt, and before we knew it, we were sitting in the middle of the funeral home laughing out loud. All of a sudden, we're looking around thinking, uh-oh, our parents are going to come and really reprimand us for this outburst. But we were surprised whenever they joined us and started sharing their stories and their beautiful memories. Our natural instincts had shown us that humor isn't a way to pretend you aren't having grief, but it is a way to celebrate the joy of a loved one's life. Another role humor plays in finding your joy comes from an old proverb: laughter is the best medicine. Now this, I find, is the most powerful aspect of how humor can bring joy to my life personally. You might imagine that a support group of metastatic breast cancer patients would be a very somber and serious group. And we do often talk about sad and serious topics. But our meetings are always very generously peppered with laughter. Often we're laughing about subjects that only those who are walking in our path would find funny. There's a bond between us, a shared humanity, and humor helps strengthen that and gives us joy. There are also times when I'm just not feeling very well or I'm very fatigued and I lose track of my joy. This is when humor really comes to the rescue. I'm sure you have all found yourself in this situation. Well, what I like to do is get online and start watching some funny videos. I love Pluto Living. Or I'll immerse myself in a funny movie. Or start watching some humorous TV shows, binge watch some TV shows. The next thing I know, I'm laughing out loud, and I'm now suddenly in a joy-filled atmosphere. So the next time that you are struggling to find your joy, just keep it simple and just laugh. Now, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Go. Have a joyful day.